Hey guys, tonight we step into a world of smoky hearths, heavy linen tunics, and futures decided with ink-stained fingers gripping a quill. You're not yet born, maybe not even imagined. But somewhere in a candlelit hall, two grown men shake hands over a deal involving sheep, land, and a girl you'll become. Imagine the creak of a wooden door. You're a baby, swaddled tight, already promised to marry a boy you've never met. You don't know this yet. You mostly cry and try not to soil yourself. But your parents just pledged your entire romantic future to another family over a dowry chest and an afternoon meal. You're barely more than a collection of soft limbs and startled hiccups. And already someone's whispered, "She'll marry our Edgar, summer of 45, God willing." Yeah, you probably won't survive this. Statistically, you've got a 1 in 3 shot of dying before age 5. And even if you make it, there's a whole lot of your body, not your choice, waiting in the wings. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how many time zones this sleepy little history club spans. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins the way a lot of medieval lives do. Cold air, swaddled cloth, a mother's tired sigh, and the murmured prayers of neighbors hoping you're not cursed. You're born into the 1300s, which is both charming and horrifying. Think fairy tale aesthetic meets dental surgery without anesthetic. And for girls? Well, you're not exactly the main character in your own life story. Your father, if he's a merchant or minor noble, probably treats your birth like a small accounting event. You're another asset, potentially valuable if managed well. If you're the third daughter, there's a chance he winces before softly swearing. Because that dowry, it's going to hurt. See, marriage isn't about love. It's about alliance, property, social climbing, and keeping the family line from getting swallowed by plague, debt, or that grumpy baron up the hill. And whether you're noble or peasant, girlhood in the 1300s is mostly a countdown to when someone decides you're old enough to be somebody's wife. What old enough means? Well, historians still argue whether puberty or property was the main driver. Technically, the church said girls could marry at 12 and boys at 14. But could and should weren't always the same. In wealthier families, it wasn't unusual for matches to be contracted years in advance, even if the couple didn't live together until later. And by later, we mean maybe 13. You grow up hearing stories, not of love, but of obedience. The tale of Aunt Isolde who got sent back to her family for talking too much, or the neighbor girl who broke off a betrothal and mysteriously took ill shortly after. You watch your older sisters vanish one by one, carried off in carts, wearing wreaths in their hair and looking back only once. By the time you're 8, you've probably been told who you'll marry. If you're lucky, he's roughly your age and doesn't have open sores. If you're very lucky, he's kind to animals. But most likely he's a name. Thomas, son of that reeve from the Eastfield. And you imagine him only in outlines. Now let's take a peek into the betrothal ceremony. Yes, there's a whole ritual for this pre-marriage stage. It's public, binding, and often features token gifts. Rings, coins, maybe a cup passed back and forth. The language is formal. I promise to take thee. It's less, sweetheart, I choose you, and more, our families agreed. And here's your receipt. In many cases, especially among the merchant class, the girl's presence is symbolic. She's present, but not exactly consulted. In some regions, if she was too young to understand what was going on, they'd nod solemnly and just continue with the formalities. The idea was, feelings can be grown into. Agreements, though, those are sacred. A quirky little detail for you. Some areas had a marriage ale, a kind of pre-wedding beer fest where families celebrated the match, which often helped fund the actual wedding. You, of course, would be too young to drink. But your future was toasted all the same. The church tried to regulate things. They insisted that consent mattered, that the couple had to speak their vows out loud. But enforcement was spotty. A bishop might scold a father for marrying off a daughter too young, but unless the girl started screaming Latin legal terms, nothing would really stop it. And even then, the church's definition of consent was flexible. It didn't necessarily mean free will, just that no one physically gagged you during the ceremony. Still, there were moments, small ones, where you found your voice. Maybe you dared to say, "I don't want him," and your mother smoothed your hair and said, "We never do at first." Or maybe you hid under the table during the announcement feast, whispering prayers to St. Margaret that he'd just go away. But in the eyes of your family, your duty was clear. Marriage was your contribution. You weren't expected to inherit land, join a guild, or manage a business. Your job was to become someone else's wife, then someone's mother, and maybe, if you outlived them all, someone's mysterious old aunt who muttered about saints and carried rosemary in her apron. One more odd tradition before we end tonight's chapter. In some regions, the groom's family might present symbolic gifts to the brides, including items like a knife, bread, or even a pair of shoes. Each carried a meaning: protection, provision, and the notion that you were walking into a new life, literally. And you? You just keep growing, one linen shift taller every year, waiting for the day when the match becomes more than a whisper, when the parchment becomes a promise, when someone finally says, "It's time." You're 9 years old when you first hear your dowry spoken of like it's a bushel of apples, except apples don't usually include a spindle, 3 hens, and that patch of barley field your grandfather swears still grows the best wheat. You're brushing your hair, maybe, or helping your mother fold linens when she sighs and mutters, "If only we had another cow, we could ask for a better match." Welcome to medieval marriage math. See, your value isn't measured in selfies or school grades. It's in assets: land, tools, cloth, livestock, even beehives. The richer your family, the richer your match. But that comes with heavier expectations. If you're poor, your bride price might be symbolic: a few coins and a sheep. But if you're merchant or minor nobility, congratulations, you're officially an economic transaction. The dowry is your family's offering to the groom's household. It's meant to offset the cost of taking you in, housing you, feeding you, and eventually raising your children. It's also a way to show off. Look at our girl. She comes with silver cutlery and half a vineyard. And the more you come with, the more likely you'll land a husband with strong shoulders and decent teeth. Quirky tidbit. In parts of Italy, there were literal dowry registries, like the medieval version of Zillow, except with parchment. Fathers would log what they were setting aside for each daughter, item by item, from butter churns to brass pots. Historians love these because they give juicy glimpses into family drama. One girl gets a necklace, another just a bundle of wool. Ouch. Now, if you're from the noble class, dowries aren't just about wealth. They're political tools. Your marriage might secure peace between feuding families or seal a new trade alliance. In some extreme cases, your body is basically the treaty. Romantic, huh? The truly elite, like counts and dukes, might offer land grants, castles, or even villages as part of a daughter's dowry. Imagine being told, "Sweetheart, you're marrying Henri, and we're throwing in 3 vineyards, a falcon, and half of Montbrock Abbey." You, blinking. Falcon? Historians still argue whether dowries were empowering or limiting. On one hand, it gave girls some economic weight, on paper at least. On the other, it reduced marriage to math. You could be beautiful, smart, and kind. But if your family didn't have 2 pennies and a pig to rub together, your romantic prospects were flatter than a pancake left in the rain. And if your father had no sons? Well, things get more complicated. You might inherit property as part of your dowry, just to keep the land from drifting out of the bloodline. Some girls, especially in the Low Countries or parts of Germany, inherited and managed estates, even if technically their husbands controlled it after marriage. You had power, in theory, until someone male coughed loud enough to remind you it was borrowed. Your mother likely spends years assembling your dowry. A blanket here, a chest there, a bag of coins hidden in the rafters just in case. And when the time comes, everything is packed carefully. Some items get sewn into your clothing, both to keep them safe and to remind the world, this girl comes with value. Let's be honest, though. Even in the most careful transactions, girls could be swindled. Maybe your father promised a certain amount, then died before paying it. Maybe your brother inherited everything and decided to renegotiate your value downwards. Or maybe your future in-laws demanded more than your family could give. Suddenly you're caught in the middle, object, not actor. But peasant girls? Different game. In rural villages, your dowry might be a cow, some seed grain, and a second-hand cloak. There's less paperwork, more haggling. Maybe your father barters directly with the boy's family over ale in the tavern, grumbling about chickens and work ethic. If you're lucky, he brings you along so you can at least see the guy before you're legally attached to him. Some small towns had matchmakers, yes, real ones, who would travel between families to negotiate marriages. Often elderly women or priests, these go-betweens knew every secret, every scandal, and who had the best turnips. They also knew which families were cursed, or claimed to be, and which boys still wet the bed at 15. An open scholarly debate lingers around one question. Was dowry always demanded, or did love matches sometimes override it? In the later Middle Ages, especially among peasants, there's some evidence that affection could sneak in, and with it, compromises. Maybe you had no wool to offer, but his family liked your bread, or the way your laugh reminded them of summer. Still, the rule of thumb held. No goods, no groom. Now, here's a weird fringe detail. In certain alpine regions, girls could boost their dowries with their own labor, literally weaving their worth. If you were skilled in spinning, embroidery, or herbal healing, that could be counted as added value. The prettier your thread work, the more marriageable you appeared. Who knew that crocheting could be life-changing? Meanwhile, your body is being scrutinized, even if no one says it outright. Are your teeth straight? Hips wide enough to bear children? Do you walk upright and carry water without spilling it? These are the kinds of things that mothers and aunts whisper about when they think you're not listening. They're building your advertisement. One aunt might brag, "She's got strong arms, never been sick a day." Another might chime in, "And her hair? Like flax in sunshine. If your hair is more mouse in a haystack, you'll just be told to keep it braided and quiet." At the heart of it all, you're learning this. Marriage isn't about choosing, it's about being chosen. And your worth is calculated not by how much you love, but how much you carry. Sometimes the heaviest thing isn't the dowry chest. It's knowing someone bartered your future in exchange for a new yoke and 5 sacks of rye. And yet, in quiet moments, you dream. Maybe the boy is kind. Maybe he smells of pine and laughs at your jokes. Maybe the matchmaker got it right for once. Or maybe he's 43 with one eyebrow and a limp. Either way, your dowry's packed. And the clock is ticking. You're 11, and your feet are finally the same size as your older sister's cast-off shoes. You've just figured out how to braid your hair without looking like you lost a fight with a goose. And you're quietly hoping no one notices that the boy down the lane gave you a flower wrapped in a leaf. But your parents? They've noticed something else. You've started changing. Hips widening, voice softer, a shadow of a woman beginning to stretch under your skin. It doesn't matter that you still sleep with a stuffed rabbit made of straw, or that you cried last week when the cat died. You are, in the eyes of your family and society at large, ready. Welcome to marriageable age. Now, the church said girls could be married at 12. Not necessarily that they should, but the line between can and must got blurry when dowries were due and alliances hung in the balance. Your period might not have even started yet, but if your body looks like it might be ready for babies within a year or two, that's enough for some eager fathers-in-law. And it's not just the nobility rushing the cradle. In the countryside, early marriages were common to secure labor, combine land, or simply lighten the number of mouths at the dinner table. You might be 11 and already a bargaining chip in a discussion between two families whose combined net worth includes exactly one goat and a leaky roof. Historians still argue whether actual consummation was expected right away or if couples were meant to wait a bit post-wedding. Some evidence suggests noble girls were sent to their husband's house, but not his bed for a few years. Others hint at full adult expectations the minute the ring hit your hand, especially if a male heir was urgently needed. It really depended on geography, wealth, and just how desperate the families were. If you're noble, your marriage might be part of a child betrothal scheme. These were formal agreements made before either party was of age, sometimes even before they could spell their own names. You might be promised to a boy you'll only marry when he turns 14 or 20. In the meantime, you're raised separately, sometimes even in a different country, with letters exchanged like awkward pen pals forced into royalty. Weird detail time. In certain French courts, noble children were married young, but not allowed to cohabit until they passed a formal inspection. Yep, you read that right. A bishop or family matron might determine when a girl's body looked ripe enough to share a bed. You'd stand still, red-cheeked and silent, while someone poked and prodded and nodded like a wine taster judging a new vintage. Medieval awkwardness at its peak. For peasants, the whole process was less ceremonial, but no less intense. No one's inspecting you, thankfully, but they're watching. Your mother notices when you start lingering near the boys at the well. Your father grumbles that you should stop laughing so loud. You're getting looks, he says. Translation. People are starting to ask if you're spoken for. You may be 11 or 12 and not understand the rules, but they apply to you anyway. You're now being discussed, evaluated, priced. And if you're already betrothed? The countdown has begun. Here's how it might play out. You're sitting in a drafty room, cheeks pink from scrubbing vegetables, when your father calls you in. He's cleaned up, wearing the good tunic, and beside him is another man, older, with the nervous energy of someone trying not to look directly at you. Agnes, your father says, voice oddly cheerful. This is Master Gerald. You remember we spoke of him. You stare at the man's belt buckle. He smells like pickled onions and dust. Gerald's family has agreed, your father continues. The marriage will be in the spring, after your next birthday. You nod. Because what else are you supposed to do? In private, you cry, or you don't. Maybe you're numb. Maybe your older cousin says it'll be fine. Gerald's not bad, just quiet. And at least he's got 2 pigs and his own barn. Better than what I got, she says darkly, gesturing to her own husband snoring on a bench. Quirky tidbit. In some parts of medieval Scandinavia, girls could technically object to a match by saying a certain phrase 3 times in front of witnesses, sort of like a DIY legal block. But getting to the point where someone took you seriously? Nearly impossible. Your mother gives you the talk, which is less talk and more superstition-laced monologue about wifely duty, saintly obedience, and how babies are both a blessing and a punishment, depending on how you behave. She tells you to hide rosemary in your pillowcase for fertility, to never walk barefoot under the full moon, and to always stay away from the third well on the south path. It's cursed, obviously. Soon, preparations begin. Your dowry items are checked and rechecked, embroidered linens, 2 clay pots, a silver hairpin your grandmother once hid from tax collectors. You're told to smile more, stand straighter, and try not to scratch your arms so much. It makes you look fidgety. Because fidgety girls, apparently, don't make good wives. And even if you still secretly hope someone will call it off, you know the odds are low. Marriages weren't impulsive, romantic whirlwinds. They were contracts, and once agreed upon, breaking one was like smashing a vase over someone's head. Loud, messy, and guaranteed to draw in half the village. So what does an 11-year-old bride-to-be dream of? Not candlelit kisses or happily ever afters. You dream of good weather for the ceremony, a gentle husband, maybe a kitten at the new house. You hope you won't be sent too far. You hope you'll still be allowed to visit your mother. You hope the bed doesn't creak too loudly when you lie down next to a stranger for the first time. Because love? That comes later, if you're lucky. Or maybe it doesn't come at all. You're 13, and suddenly everyone's acting like you're made of glass and gold coins. You wake up one morning, and your mother's humming. Not her usual tired hum, but the one she only uses when she's thinking about nice things, like warm bread or a good shoe deal. She's polishing your best dress, darning the hem, muttering, "Can't have them thinking we're poor, even if we are." Because today, they're coming. That's right. The groom's family, the whole selection committee in boots and cloaks trudging down the lane with the air of people about to inspect a prize cow. Except this cow is you, standing near the hearth pretending to stir soup like you weren't coached for a week straight. No slouching, no chewing your hair, and for heaven's sake, speak when spoken to, but not too much. You don't want to seem opinionated. Welcome to the marriage inspection. This is your first real experience with the medieval version of speed dating. Only, instead of asking about hobbies, they're checking your teeth. Literally. It's not unusual for a prospective mother-in-law to pull your chin forward and peek into your mouth like she's buying a horse. Good teeth equals healthy children. Bad teeth, someone whispers about bad humors, and your odds take a nosedive. Some girls are subjected to more than dental checks. Hands are examined. Too rough? Might not be fertile. Posture is judged, and yes, weight is a thing. Sturdy means healthy. Delicate means fragile. Skinny sometimes means cursed or malnourished. It's a tightrope. Historians still argue whether these inspections were formalized or just custom, but enough records survive to confirm that, in many places, girls were physically evaluated like livestock before the final marriage deal went through. And not just by the groom's family, sometimes by the whole village. Your future mother-in-law might bring a neighbor, a priest, even a suspiciously quiet herbalist with more opinions than teeth. If you're highborn, things get weirder. There might be court artists sent to sketch you. Yes, like a royal Tinder profile. These weren't portraits you posed for smiling under cherry blossoms. No, you'd sit stiffly in layers of itchy brocade while some poor apprentice tried to make you look marriageable on parchment. It didn't matter if the sketch looked nothing like you. If the land was good and the dowry better, you were halfway to the altar. Now here's your quirky tidbit. In some Italian city-states, brides-to-be were literally paraded through markets or town squares during festivals. Not quite a Miss Medieval pageant, but close. The idea was to show off beauty, wealth, and eligibility all at once. Girls wore their finest clothes and walked carefully, heads high, avoiding eye contact while everyone whispered. If you're from a more modest household, no sketches or parades. But word still gets around. The blacksmith's wife tells the butcher you've got strong arms. The baker mentions you don't faint in the heat. and your mother quietly plants gossip that your weaving is better than most. This reputation grooming is strategic. After all, the matchmaking process is partly driven by perception. If someone says your family is cursed, because your aunt once ran off with a monk or your cousin has a sixth toe, you might lose a perfectly good offer. Image is everything. And your image, it's being curated like a very nervous brand campaign. So when the groom's family finally sits down at your table, you smile like your life depends on it. Because, well, it kind of does. The questions come in slow, measured waves. Does she rise early? Can she manage a hearth alone? Has she learned to make ale? Any signs of, melancholia? Translation. Has she ever cried too much? Your parents answer for you, of course. You just nod, eyes lowered, hands folded like you're praying not to sneeze. And when your father says, "She has a level head," everyone smiles politely, as if he's just read a poem. Then there's the haggling. Once the girl's body is approved, it's time to talk business. Your dowry is discussed in detail, down to how many chickens, what kind of linen, and how much silver. Your father might exaggerate a little. "The sheep is almost ready to lamb," he says, knowing full well it probably isn't. But so does the other father, who nods with the practiced diplomacy of a man pretending to believe a fishing story. The back and forth can go on for hours, sometimes days. Offers made, counteroffers given. If your families are smart, the local priest is involved to keep things honest, though even he might pocket a coin to adjust his memory later. Open scholarly debate time. Did girls ever have the power to reject a match at this stage? Some evidence says yes, especially if the community respected her voice. In more liberal towns, or within tight-knit guild families, a girl's disinterest might torpedo the deal. But in most cases, your silence is interpreted as obedience, not hesitation. And sometimes, there are surprises. Maybe the groom shows up and he's not terrible. He's young, taller than expected, and doesn't have that middle-aged beer belly you feared. He looks at you. Not your hands, not your hips, but you. It lasts just a moment, but your breath catches. Or maybe it's the opposite. He sneezes into his food and wipes his nose with the back of his hand. Later, he loudly asks your father whether you eat much. Your mother's grip on the table tightens like she's considering murder via soup ladle. In either case, once the deal is sealed, there's no dramatic announcement. Just a satisfied handshake, a shared drink, and maybe a smile if everyone's feeling generous. The word spreads fast. By evening, 3 neighbors have stopped by to congratulate your family and ask nosy questions. Your mother starts preparing your trousseau immediately. That's your bridal bundle, clothes, blankets, maybe a small mirror if you're lucky. Your life, wrapped in linen and hope. And you? You go outside. You sit near the river. You try to picture the rest of your life with a stranger. Because that's what's next. You're 13. And you've just been chosen. By the time you're 14, your trousseau chest has started to feel like a second body in the room. Looming, ever-growing, smelling faintly of lavender and moths. Every few days, your mother adds something to it. A hemmed shift. A small rosary. Once, she sneaks in a ribbon that used to be hers, tied neatly in a knot as though it were a secret handshake between women who've survived all this before. This chest is your dowry in motion, your value in wool and thread. Your grandmother brings you stories from her own wedding, half real, half myth, and tells you which saints to pray to for strong hips and easy births. Your father teaches you how to count coin properly, just in case your husband is the forgetful type. Your younger siblings, meanwhile, are told not to touch anything near the chest. That's your future, your mother hisses, swatting away sticky fingers. This phase is a kind of limbo. You're betrothed but not yet married. Everyone treats you like a liminal creature, half girl, half wife in waiting. Old men stop joking around you. Other girls start looking at you differently. And the boys? They keep their distance, at least until the wedding feast, when it's socially acceptable to pretend they were always interested. But even now, the pressure doesn't let up. In fact, it sharpens, because this is the phase where the real judgment begins. You're no longer being assessed just for suitability. You're now expected to prove your readiness, to show everyone you can cook, clean, manage a household, and behave modestly while doing all of it. You become a living resume, quirky tidbit. In parts of Eastern Europe, brides in training were tested by being asked to bake a loaf of bread under pressure, while elders stood around supervising. If your bread rose well, you were ready. If not, well, hope your dowry was extra heavy. And then there's the spiritual side. The church had a lot to say about brides. You're told to pray to Saint Agnes, the patron saint of girls, and Saint Monica, patron of long-suffering wives. Yes, really. Your priest gives you a short talk on virtue. It's vague but ominous, involving terms like obedience, sacrament, and fleshly temptation. You nod solemnly while thinking about whether you'll still be allowed to keep your cat. And here comes our scholarly debate. Was the church more protective or exploitative of young brides? Some historians argue that marriage at a young age was a spiritual shield against sin, especially for noble girls who might otherwise be seduced or kidnapped. Others argue it was just another form of control, designed to move female bodies like chess pieces under the guise of holiness. Meanwhile, there's the social prep. Your friends whisper advice, mostly terrifying and mostly wrong. Don't cry on the wedding night, one says. It makes the husband think you're weak. Another tells you to fake sleep if you're nervous. Just let him figure it out. You start practicing how to walk like a married woman. Straighter back, slower steps. Chin down, but not too down. Your mother reminds you to never laugh with your mouth open. You're not a stable boy, she says, pinching your cheeks. You start using more formal words. You stop skipping. You wear shoes every day, even when it's hot and your toes itch. Your life becomes a slow goodbye to childhood. Every familiar object in your home feels tinged with sentiment. The spoon you always used, the bench you carved your name into, the little window ledge where you watched storms roll in. And the worst part? No one talks about it. They all know you're leaving, but they act like you're not. Like maybe if they stay quiet, time will freeze. But time doesn't freeze, it gallops. The wedding day draws closer. People you barely know stop you on the street to comment. You'll make a fine wife, they say. Or, he's lucky to get you. One man, an uncle of someone, actually mutters, she looks sturdy, and you spend 3 days overthinking that until your mother yells at you to stop skipping supper. Then come the village customs. Every region has its own, and yours is no different. You're led to the well and made to throw in a pin for luck. A neighbor girl brushes your hair and braids it with sprigs of sage and rue. Someone draws a chalk mark on the door of your home, the sign of protection, or perhaps just a reminder that change is coming. Then there's the bath. You're scrubbed from head to toe, not in luxury, but in symbolism. It's about washing away the past, dirt, girlhood, childishness. Your aunt scrubs your feet while humming an old wedding song about milk and honey and carrying fire without a flame. You're not sure what it means, but you pretend you do. Everyone wants to believe you're ready, and maybe you are. You've learned how to fold linens perfectly. You've memorized your soon-to-be husband's favorite foods, his siblings' names, his parents' birthdays. You've practiced your signature, awkward and a little lopsided, on scraps of parchment, just in case you ever need to sign anything important. You've even started to feel something. Nerves, yes, but also anticipation? Possibility? It's hard to name. You sit up at night imagining the house you'll live in. Whether there'll be flowers near the door. Whether you'll be allowed to hang your own herbs to dry. Whether you'll still be you, just somewhere else. And on one quiet evening, as the village settles into sleep and your trousseau chest is finally shut tight with a rope looped around the handles, your mother sits beside you. She doesn't speak right away. Then she says, "It's all right to be scared." You nod. She adds, "It's all right to hope too." And for the first time in days, you believe her. It's your wedding day. You wake before the sun, not because anyone woke you, but because something deep in your body knew. Today, everything changes. The house is already in motion. You hear footsteps, pots clanking, someone whispering that the ale barrel still needs tapping. There's a scent of boiled herbs, something sharp and green. And beneath it all, the unmistakable smell of fresh bread and wood smoke. Your heart is racing, but outwardly, you're calm. That's part of the performance. The bridal preparations start before you can even yawn. Your mother, your aunt, and 2 neighbor women arrive like a whirlwind with a mission. They carry your wedding gown. If you're wealthy, it's velvet or silk, dyed in precious colors like deep blue or crimson. If you're modest, it's wool or linen, bleached as white as possible, tied with your best ribbon. Either way, it's not new. New clothes are too extravagant, too lucky. You're not a saint. You're a young girl getting married, not ascending into heaven. They strip you down and scrub your skin again. Not for dirt this time, but for spirit. They brush your hair until it shines and twist it into braids or a crown, depending on your region. A veil is placed over your head. Not always white, sometimes yellow, sometimes red, sometimes embroidered with little charms meant to ward off bad luck or nosy spirits. They fasten a belt around your waist, symbol of chastity, strength, future maternity. It's not lost on you that this is the tightest belt you've ever worn. Now for the quirky part. In some villages, girls weren't allowed to walk to the church unaccompanied. So they were carried. Yes, literally picked up by relatives or friends and lifted over puddles, mud, or symbolic thresholds, so their feet wouldn't touch anything unclean. Think of it as an early medieval version of VIP service. You're trying not to laugh as your uncle hoists you like a sack of flour. The church bells begin to ring, and with them, the nerves flood in. This is it. You make your way to the church, or are gently nudged, one hand on your back and another fixing your veil as you go. People line the street to watch. Some toss flower petals, others whisper and smile, and a few just stare. Everyone has an opinion, and you can feel them pressing into your skin like invisible fingerprints. At the church door, your groom is waiting. He looks different in formal clothes, more serious, or maybe just terrified, like you. His tunic is freshly pressed, his hair combed. Someone's rubbed oil into his boots so they shine like ambition. He nods at you, just once. You nod back. You're both herded inside. The ceremony is solemn, long, and very public. Forget the idea of a private exchange of vows. In the 1300s, marriages, especially among villagers, are done at the church porch, often outside the building itself, so the whole community can witness it. Privacy is not the point. Accountability is. If something goes wrong later, everyone will remember who promised what. The priest asks the key questions. Are you both here by free will? Do you consent? Will you be faithful? You say yes, quietly but clearly. You glance at your husband-to-be. He says yes too. His voice cracks a little, and someone snickers. The priest glares. Rings, if you can afford them, are exchanged. Otherwise, it might just be a token. Some coin, a bit of cloth, a shared piece of bread. The symbol matters more than the object. Then come the blessings. The priest blesses your union, your bodies, your eventual children. He prays that your womb be fruitful, that your husband be strong, and that your home be free of sin and mice, though probably in fancier Latin. Now for the debated detail. Did girls understand the full implications of the vows they were making? Some scholars argue yes. After all, girls were taught about marriage from a young age. Others suggest many had no idea what they were walking into, especially if they were married off before their first moon cycle. You know what you've been told, but you're not sure what it means yet. Once the ceremony ends, it's time for the part people care about almost as much as the marriage itself. The feast. Oh, the feast. Back at your family's home, or sometimes your new in-laws' barn, the celebration bursts into full chaos. Long tables are lined with trenchers of bread, roast meats, pickled vegetables, and pastries shaped like birds and beasts. Ale flows freely, wine if you're lucky. Someone plays a flute that's slightly out of tune. A cousin tries to juggle and drops a chicken leg. You're seated in the place of honor. You and your new husband side by side, surrounded by well-wishers who want to toast to your happiness and also, let's be honest, judge your table manners. A cheese merchant stands up to recite a wedding poem, except he forgets half the words and ends up singing about sheep. Someone starts a round of riddles. Children run under the tables like gremlins. It's loud, joyful, and just a little bit ridiculous. And here comes your weird local custom again. Some places throw wheat at the bride, others break bread over her head. And in a few regions, guests literally escort the couple to the marriage bed in a ceremonial procession, singing bawdy songs and tossing walnuts. You're not sure how to feel about this. Probably very red-faced. Eventually, the sky darkens, the candles are lit, and the guests get rowdy. Your husband gently touches your hand. He says nothing, just gives you a look that says, "We're doing this, aren't we?" You nod. What else is there to do? And the crowd erupts in cheers. You're led away, not because you're ready, but because this is the script, the ritual, the rite of passage. That night, your world becomes a closed door, a warm bed, and the quiet rustle of new linens. No matter what happens, tomorrow you'll be someone new, a wife, and everyone else will expect you to act like it. You wake up to sunlight, but nothing feels bright. The bed is unfamiliar. The room smells like straw, sweat, and candle wax. Your gown from yesterday lies crumpled on the floor, like a husk of your former self. Beside you, your new husband sleeps on his side, breathing heavily, one arm dangling off the edge of the mattress. For a moment, you pretend you're still dreaming. But then you hear footsteps downstairs, and you remember. This is your home now. This is your life. There's no breakfast in bed, no romantic whispers, no poetic declarations. You're expected to get up, tidy yourself, and report for duty, whatever that means in this new household. Your mother-in-law, yes, her, will likely be waiting. And she is. She sizes you up the moment you descend the stairs. She says nothing at first, but the way her eyes flick from your hair to your hem says plenty. You've heard stories. Every new bride walks into this silent battle. If your husband's mother is warm, you're lucky. If she's icy, brace yourself. You're offered a seat, a bit of porridge, and your first round of housework, a basket of wool to card. You sit and work, your hands trembling just enough that the old woman raises a single eyebrow. Your husband's younger brother enters, smirks, and exits. This is how day one begins. And this is how your new role unfolds, slowly, awkwardly, and with absolutely zero instruction manual. Your husband, meanwhile, slips back into his routine with ease. He's known in this household. He's trusted. You are not. You are still being measured. And it doesn't stop. You spend the next few days learning everything from the layout of the pantry to the quirks of your in-laws' temperaments. Don't open that door. Don't stir the stew counterclockwise. Don't speak during the Sunday roast unless spoken to. You memorize all of it because mistakes are tallied silently. One morning, your mother-in-law tests your ability to bake bread. She gives you the flour and just enough instruction to trap you. You knead, you wait, you bake. It comes out uneven. You catch her frown before she masks it with a tight smile. It's exhausting. And remember that trousseau chest you so lovingly packed? It's here now, but it feels like it belongs to someone else. You open it on day 4 to take out a clean shift, and all the lavender sachets have lost their smell. The items you once viewed as a badge of readiness now feel like trophies from a tournament you're no longer sure you won. Now for the mainstream historical truth bomb. In most parts of medieval Europe, marriage wasn't a love match. It was an economic alliance. And you're reminded of this constantly. Your husband talks to his father about grain prices and tenancy disputes. You're expected to smile and refill mugs. Your property that came with perks, a decent dowry, a calm temperament, 2 solid weaving calluses on your palms. And yet there's something that keeps you grounded. Your chores. They're mundane, repetitive, and often thankless, but they give you structure. You wake at dawn, you gather eggs, you skim cream, you mend wool, you brush the hearth with wet branches, and while you work, you listen. The servants whisper. The neighbors drop gossip. Your husband mutters things under his breath while counting coins. You begin to gather not just information, but insight. This household may not be yours yet, but you are quietly mapping every corner of it. Now for the fringe tidbit. In some towns, there was a bizarre belief that the first item a new bride touched in her husband's home would influence her fate. If it was bread, she'd never go hungry. If it was firewood, her house would always be warm. If it was a broom, well, she'd be cleaning forever. No pressure, right? And then there's the social aspect. You're not just adjusting to a new family, you're adjusting to a new identity. Women in the 1300s had few public voices, but within the domestic sphere, there was hierarchy. And you, dear newlywed, are at the bottom. You might outrank a servant, but not by much. Not yet. At Sunday Mass, you sit beside your husband. People stare at you, not unkindly, but with curiosity. Is she managing well? Is she suitable? Did he do all right for himself? Children whisper behind you. A few older women give you half smiles. One pats your hand and mutters, "You'll learn." It's both comforting and horrifying. Now let's dive into a scholarly disagreement. Was marriage empowering for medieval women once they were inside the household, or simply another form of restriction? Some historians argue that wives gained considerable soft power through domestic management, especially in prosperous homes. Others suggest that any power was an illusion, tightly controlled and only respected until a male heir arrived. Either way, you start to adapt. You figure out when to speak, when to disappear, and when to take the long way to the market just to get a break. You find that your husband is more talkative when he's tired. He hums tunelessly while sharpening tools. He likes his soup a little saltier than most. And, strangely, he asks your opinion about the harvest calendar. You answer cautiously. He nods. It's not affection, not yet. But it's something. A glimmer of equality? Or maybe just necessity disguised as partnership. One night, as you tuck yourself into bed, your husband turns to you and says, "You work hard. It's simple, unadorned, but genuine." You smile in the dark and whisper, "So do you." No one's sweeping you off your feet, but maybe, just maybe, you're planting your own. A few months pass. The world outside doesn't look different. Same moss on the well stones, same squabbling chickens in the yard, but you feel the change deep inside your skin. You're no longer the awkward girl pretending to belong. You've grown into the role, step by cautious step. You know which floorboards creak and which ones squeak. You know how your husband takes his broth and which of your in-laws gossips the most. You've figured out when to speak and when to just nod and stir the pot. And then, one morning, your belly feels different. At first, it's just a flutter. Nothing you can name. But over the next weeks, your appetite shifts, your sleep feels heavier, and your cycle never comes. You know the signs. Every woman does, even if they pretend not to. You are, it seems, with child. Now, this changes everything. You tell your husband in a quiet voice by the hearth, and for a moment, his expression freezes, like someone just told him the barn was on fire. But then he smiles, awkward and slow, and pats your hand. It's not poetic, but it's real. Your mother-in-law, on the other hand, jumps into motion like she's been waiting for this day since you arrived. She digs out bundles of old linen, starts muttering recipes for broth and teas, and even tells the baker's wife, before you've had a chance to tell your own mother. Welcome to medieval family privacy. Pregnancy in the 1300s is no gentle glow. It's a high-stakes gamble. One mainstream fact: childbirth was the leading cause of death for women in medieval Europe. And that risk hovers over you like a smoky halo. Everyone has a horror story. The girl who bled out in winter, the baker's daughter who delivered twins and never woke up, the noblewoman who screamed for 3 days straight. But no one says these things directly to you. Instead, they hand you charms, little bits of cloth with saints stitched in gold thread. They whisper prayers under their breath. They press herbs into your hands and tell you to brew them just in case. You spend your days moving more carefully, rubbing your belly when no one's looking. You wonder if it's a boy or a girl, if the baby will have your nose or his eyes. You hope they don't come in winter. You hope they come at all. Meanwhile, life marches on. Your chores shift. No more lifting heavy baskets, no scrubbing pots until your back aches. Your husband insists you rest, but also asks what's for dinner, which feels suspiciously like mixed messaging. You humor him. Now here's a quirky tidbit. In some towns, pregnant women were discouraged from gazing into mirrors, believing that what they saw would imprint onto the baby. You catch yourself staring at your reflection one afternoon, rounder cheeks, softer jaw, and quickly look away. Just in case. You're also pulled into a new kind of community, one that includes midwives, older women, and anyone who's ever screamed into a linen sheet and survived. They talk to you differently now. You're one of them. Or at least, you're becoming one. Your mother visits and brings a little cloth cap she made years ago, just in case her first grandchild might wear it. She tucks it into your trousseau chest like a promise. Or a prayer. The church, too, starts to play a different role in your daily rhythm. The priest blesses you at Sunday Mass with an extra sprinkle of holy water. He mentions the Virgin Mary in a way that suddenly feels deeply personal. You start noticing every statue of a mother and child. They all seem to be watching you. Here comes a scholarly debate that really gets people squinting at the records. Did medieval women receive emotional support during pregnancy, or were they treated as ticking time bombs? Some historians argue that communities rallied around expectant mothers with real care. Others think the support was purely functional, more about protecting the heir than the woman. You suspect it's both. The attention you get now is thick with meaning. You're not just carrying a child, you're carrying legacy, a worker, a dowry, a future. As your belly grows, so does the scrutiny. Strangers on the road nod at you more slowly, as if you've become sacred and fragile all at once. Your husband speaks in softer tones. Even the chickens seem less irritating, though that might just be fatigue. You start to prepare the birthing chamber, a fancy term for the best room with a clean bed, fresh straw, and women who know what they're doing. You sew baby linens with hands that ache from the cold. You whisper to the little being inside you, "Wait until the snow melts. Wait until I'm ready." And still, the days pass. The baby kicks for the first time when you're pouring soup, and you nearly drop the bowl. You laugh and cry at the same time. Your sister-in-law catches you and doesn't say a word, just smiles and hands you a rag. You think about names, about lullabies, about whether you'll survive this. Because that's the quiet truth no one says aloud. Love is secondary. Survival is primary. And yet, something about this growing life inside you makes everything else seem sharper. The wood grain in the table, the warmth in your husband's hand, the sound of wind through the shutters. You've become a new kind of person now. Not just a wife, a mother-in-waiting. And every heartbeat inside you is a drumbeat to the future. Labor doesn't wait for convenience. You feel the first pang just after midnight, the fire in the hearth down to its last breath, and the house curled in silence. At first you think it's just indigestion from that questionable onion tart. But no. It comes again, stronger, deeper, like your bones are trying to tell you something in a language you don't yet speak. You wake your husband with a whispered, "It's time." He bolts upright like you've poured ice water on him, then stumbles over his own boots trying to fetch your mother-in-law. Within minutes, the household is a flurry of hushed movement. Water is set to boil. Cloth is warmed by the hearth. Someone runs to fetch the midwife. You're helped into the birthing chamber, the one room your new life has silently orbited for the last several months. The shutters are drawn. Candles flicker. Every shadow looks like a prayer. The midwife arrives in a hurry, cloaked and red-faced. She's older than you expected, but her hands are steady, and her voice is firm in a way that makes even your mother-in-law take a step back. She smiles at you, thin but kind. "Let's bring this babe into the world," she says. Mainstream fact time. Most births in medieval Europe happened at home, assisted by midwives, female relatives, and sometimes, if you were lucky, a helpful priest nearby. Doctors were rare. Men weren't usually allowed in the room, unless things went wrong. The hours crawl. Pain folds you in half and then lets you go, only to grab you again. You grip linen until your knuckles bleach. Someone dabs your forehead with vinegar-soaked cloth. You cry out, and no one tells you to hush. In this room, screaming is sacred. Your husband paces outside, hands clenched, face pale. You hear the clunk of his boots back and forth like a heartbeat just beyond reach. And here's a quirky tidbit. In some towns, women giving birth were encouraged to hold relics, tiny bone fragments of saints, because it was believed the holy connection would ease pain or protect the baby. You're handed a small pendant carved with the image of Saint Margaret, the patron of childbirth. You don't know if it works, but you don't let go of it for a second. At last, something shifts. The midwife leans close. "One more push, love. One more and we'll meet them." You bear down with the strength of every woman who came before you. Your mother, your grandmother, the nameless girls who didn't make it. You cry, you curse under your breath. You think your body might split in two. And then, a sound. A squall, sharp and wild and alive. The room exhales all at once. "It's a boy," the midwife says, holding him up like a prize from the gods. You're too exhausted to react. But you see him. Red, wriggling, impossibly real, and your heart folds around him like warm dough. He's here. He made it. And somehow, so did you. They wrap him in linen and place him against your chest. His head is the size of a small apple. He snuffles at your skin. You can't stop staring. Later, when the room is quieter, your husband is allowed in. He kneels beside the bed and touches the baby's fingers, as if afraid they'll vanish. You see something in his eyes that wasn't there before. Not love exactly, but reverence or awe. "Thank you," he whispers. You nod. Words feel too small. Here comes a scholarly debate to stir the pot. Were medieval mothers deeply emotionally bonded to their infants, or were high infant mortality rates a barrier to attachment? Some historians argue that mothers kept a protective distance, expecting loss. Others say love was no less real just because death hovered nearby. You, holding this tiny breathing creature to your chest, don't need a scholar to tell you how you feel. Still, you know what comes next. Baptism. Infant baptism happens fast, often within days, because the fear of losing an unbaptized soul is too great to risk. The priest arrives the next morning. The water is cold, and the chapel smells of incense and old wood. You choose a name from your husband's family and one from yours, a peace offering in syllables. The child is now, officially, a Christian, a soul marked. The priest gives a thin smile. The baby sneezes. Everyone laughs, but the laughter is brief. After baptism comes the constant question, will he live? Because here's the grim reality. 1 in every 3 infants doesn't survive past their first year. Colds turn into fevers, fevers into seizures. No one ever stops worrying. Not really. So you wrap him tight. You nurse him with care. You brew teas and whisper songs and refuse to sleep deeply, just in case. Your days become strange and sacred. Time warps. You mark hours by feedings, by cries, by the weight of his little body in your arms. Your husband begins to see you differently. There's respect now, where before there was uncertainty. He still forgets to pick up his tunic, but he kisses your forehead when he thinks you're asleep. You get visitors, curious neighbors, aunts, the baker's wife. They peek at the baby and smile like you've done something miraculous. In a way, you have. And here's the oddest part. You start to forget your old life, not all of it, just the girl you were before. You are now a mother. You are the hearth, the soft chest, the lullaby, the provider of warmth and milk and hope. You have a new name now, spoken in half-jokes and serious tones. Lady of the house. And while you don't feel very noble with spit up on your shoulder and a tunic crusted with barley, you smile when they say it. You've earned it in blood and breath. You survived the hardest part, or the first hard part, because medieval motherhood? Oh, it's just getting started. Spring settles over the village like a soft sigh. The ice has melted into earth. The sky stretches bluer than you remember it. Your son, still nameless to strangers but full of personality to you, now grips your finger with surprising strength. You breathe easier. A little. Your days, though, are no less full. You are not only a mother. You are still a wife, a daughter-in-law, and very much a cog in the medieval household machine. And now, you are entering the unglamorous phase of married life, managing the household economy. Because make no mistake, being a wife in the 1300s isn't just about hearth and hugs. It's about administration. You rise before the sun. Your first task? Take stock. You check the grain stores. You count the eggs. You mentally assess which hens are looking suspiciously broody. Your husband may work the fields, but you are responsible for making sure the house doesn't eat itself into starvation. Here's one mainstream fact. Medieval households ran on a tight, seasonally driven cycle, and the woman of the house managed nearly all food storage and domestic labor. You are CFO of the pantry, COO of the root cellar, and CEO of Whose Turn Is It to Milk the Goat? And guess what? You're actually pretty good at it. You know now how long dried beans keep. You've memorized how much barley you'll need to stretch between harvests. You can spot spoiled meat from across the room. It's not glamorous, but it's survival. And in medieval terms, survival is the gold standard. Your husband starts consulting you on more things. Whether to sell a goose, when to call in the carpenter. He doesn't always follow your advice, but he's asking, which, around here, is the medieval equivalent of sliding a spreadsheet across the table and nodding with respect. The women in your household, your mother-in-law, the aunt who never leaves, your sister-in-law still lingering unwed, have their own spheres of control. But you're carving out one of your own. Now, here's a quirky tidbit. In some villages, housewives who managed their household particularly well were given nicknames like Goodwife Goldhand or Mistress Fullbin. Sounds like a medieval Yelp review, but spoken in hushed admiration over wool spinning and turnip peeling. And it's not just your house that benefits. You trade with other women. You swap dried herbs for soap. You hear who's got a surplus of leeks and whose butter went rancid. The real power in town doesn't always wear armor. It often carries a basket and walks with a determined stride. But let's not romanticize it too much. Things are still precarious. Food can spoil in a sudden warm snap. Livestock can fall ill. A single storm can wipe out a whole season of planning. You've learned to live with a kind of low-grade tension, like a string pulled too tight but never snapping. Sometimes, the tension breaks through. Your husband comes home with mud on his boots and tells you that a neighboring manor raised their tax. Suddenly, your barley ration has to stretch 2 more weeks. You want to scream. Instead, you nod and start soaking lentils. Historians still argue whether medieval housewives were autonomous economic actors or merely passive stewards of their husbands' resources. You lean toward the former, because if this ship sinks, you're the one who has to bail water with your apron. There are moments, though, when you find pride in the drudgery, like when you calculate exactly how much yeast to use without wasting flour, or when you mend a tunic so well your husband thinks it's new, or when the baby finally sleeps through the night and you wake up before anyone else and just sit in the silence, a queen of your candlelit domain. But every queen needs to guard her throne, which is why you now take special interest in who comes to your door. Peddlers, pilgrims, the occasional monk selling indulgences like holy trading cards. Each is a potential threat or opportunity. You've learned to spot liars. You've also learned which traveling merchants carry the good honey. Your husband occasionally suggests you rest more, sit by the fire, let the other women do it. You smile sweetly and suggest he sew a new shift from scratch. He quickly finds something outdoors to check on. And just when you think you've found a rhythm, a balance of domestic mastery and low-level anxiety, life throws a challenge into the stew pot. Your sister-in-law is being courted. Not seriously, of course, just rumors. A boy from a neighboring village with decent sheep and average teeth. But even rumors stir the pot, because if she marries and leaves, that's one less pair of hands for the laundry, one less voice in the gossip chain, one more seat at a different hearth. You help her comb her hair one evening, brushing out the knots with gentle fingers. You remember being in her shoes, nervous, annoyed, hoping for magic, expecting very little. "You'll be fine," you whisper. She grumbles. You were fine. You both laugh. It's a rare and beautiful thing. That night you lay in bed and listen to the quiet crackle of the fire. Your son is curled against you like a little loaf of bread. Your husband snores softly. And for a moment, it feels like the world is holding still, just for you. You've come far from the girl who stood awkwardly in a new dress, waiting for approval. Now, you're the one others turn to. You know when to haggle and when to barter. You know which mushroom is safe and which one will have your whole house praying to Saint Benedict in a panic. You are not noble, not rich, not a storybook heroine, but you're competent. And in a world where winter is never far away and a bad decision can mean hunger, that's worth more than gold. You wake to the clatter of hooves, not just one or two. A lot. And not the lazy, clip-clop rhythm of a passing cart. This is sharp, urgent, like the sound of decisions being made far above your pay grade. You shuffle to the door, half wrapped in your wool shawl, and peer into the early dawn. Dust churns in the road. The reeve is riding hard, followed by 2 messengers, their tunics marked with your lord's crest. You feel the chill in your spine before the sun even warms your toes. "News," your husband mutters behind you. He's already buckling his belt. There's always news in the 1300s, but rarely the kind you want. Turns out someone important is dying, or rather, has died. A noble lord 2 holdings over, without a direct male heir. And just like that, the whole balance of land and marriage ties shifts like a table with one short leg. You see, titles need heirs, and heirs need wives. And suddenly, your little village, tucked into the hills, barely worth a passing glance, is on the radar of marriage brokers again. Mainstream fact alert. Medieval landholding families were deeply invested in marriage alliances, and when a nobleman died without a clear successor, all kinds of scheming, betrothing, and horse trading began, often involving girls barely into their teens. This time, it's your neighbor's daughter they're after. You've known her since she was all knees and tangled braids. Now she's 15, quiet, with a dreamy look in her eyes, and a fondness for feeding the goats while humming. The match is announced during Sunday Mass. The priest drops it in between psalms like he's reading from a menu. By the grace of our Lord, betrothal is made between Lady Cecily of Hillbridge and Sir Edric of Morton. Cue the whispered gasps. Sir Edric is old, not ancient, but certainly not goat-feeding dreamy. He's a widower. Twice. And he walks with a cane that clicks on stone like a Death Watch beetle. You see Cecily's mother smile too hard. Her father looks smug. Cecily stares down at her hands. This is how dynasties survive. Not with love or poetry or serendipitous meet-cutes at mead festivals. No, with contracts inked on dried calf skin and girls shipped off like particularly polite livestock. Here's the quirky twist. Some noble families sent small figurines or love tokens as early betrothal gifts, tiny carved knights or clasped hands, which were more decorative than romantic. You later hear Cecily received a wooden comb inlaid with tin. Her brother says she hasn't touched it. You bump into her the next day by the well. She says nothing at first, just pulls water, slow and methodical. "I'm not scared," she finally says, unprompted. "Just, I wish I had met him first." You nod. What else can you do? You can't offer escape. There's no runaway cottage in the woods, no charming stable boy waiting in the wings. This isn't a storybook. It's a system. "Make sure your trunks are heavy," you offer instead. "Bring winter wool, and take that green ribbon you like." She smiles, small and sad. "I will." Historians still argue whether young girls like Cecily had any real agency in these arrangements, or whether the appearance of consent was just that, an appearance. Some records show girls resisting, others show them taking pride in advantageous matches. The truth? Probably somewhere in the ashes between. You think of your own marriage. It feels like 1,000 years ago. You were luckier, in a way. Younger, yes, but matched locally. And your husband, for all his awkwardness, never made you fear him. Cecily is leaving next month. In the meantime, preparations take over her household like ivy. Seamstresses arrive to measure her for travel garments. The priest visits more than usual. There are discussions about dowry items, inventory, livestock valuation. You're asked to help pack her linens. Her mother insists everything be spotless. You wonder if it's to make a good impression, or because it's the one thing she can control. Maybe both. Cecily sits on a stool nearby, watching her life folded into bundles. "I dreamed last night," she says softly. that I married a goose." You blink. "A goose?" She nods. "And he wore a crown, but it kept slipping off his head." You try not to laugh. "Sounds about right." The day before she departs, there's a feast. Nothing extravagant, just roasted roots, a loaf shaped like a swan, and some local ale strong enough to knock over a bishop. People toast. There's light music. You see Cecily smile once. At dusk, you give her a little pouch. Inside, dried lavender, a tiny mirror, and a silver coin. "For scent, for reflection, and for luck," you tell her. She hugs you. Not tightly, but long. And then she's gone. Just like that. Her place at the table empty. Her giggle gone from the goat's pen. Her ribbon forgotten and fluttering in a branch. You wonder where she is. If she's warm, if she's scared, if her new husband knows how to make her laugh, even once. You make a point to remember her stories. Someone has to. Because the marriage market in the 1300s doesn't leave room for sentiment. It moves on quickly, always searching for the next girl of age, the next tie to bind, the next land to secure. But you hold space for Cecily, for the girl she was, and for the woman she might still become, beneath the silk and silence. The wind tastes different when someone you care about disappears down a dirt road. Days pass, then weeks. Cecily is gone, but not forgotten. Her name still drifts through conversation, half whispered in sympathy, half marveled with envy. You hear one woman mutter that Cecily's new house has tiled floors. Another swears the girl now wears gloves lined with squirrel fur. You smile at that. You once wore squirrel fur. Briefly, the squirrel wasn't thrilled. Still, life barrels forward. And now, a new focus arises in your village: inheritance and dowry management. It's not as thrilling as jousting, perhaps, but it's a cornerstone of the medieval marriage market. And it's not just for the nobles. Your husband's cousin has died without sons. He leaves behind 2 daughters and land. Not much, but enough to stir up the local gossip grist mill. Here's the mainstream fact. In the 1300s, inheritance laws were a complex dance of gender, custom, and local tradition, especially when property passed to daughters. Sometimes it was allowed, sometimes not. Sometimes daughters got a piece, sometimes just a promise, and when they did inherit, they suddenly became very, very interesting to men who otherwise wouldn't have noticed if they were on fire. Now, the cousins' daughters, Marjorie and Beatrice, are both technically entitled to a slice of the land, which means, of course, their marriage value has shot through the thatched roof. You sit with their mother one evening, helping her thread a needle through a mourning cloth. "I need a scribe," she sighs, "and a priest, and probably 3 lawyers." "You need a nap," you reply. She chuckles, then whispers, "Do you think I can get one married off by midsummer?" "You're asking the wrong person," you smirk. "I'm still trying to get the goat to stop biting my apron." She doesn't laugh this time, just nods slowly. See, this is the part where the quiet panic begins. Because while marriage is often about timing and politics and teeth-to-sheep ratios, it's also about control. And few things in the medieval world are more fraught than the control of land by women. Fringe tidbit for you. In some regions, daughters who inherited even small plots of land were required to take an oath of loyalty to their lord, just in case they got any wild ideas about independent thought. Charming, right? The village men are suddenly more helpful to Marjorie and Beatrice. One offers to carry water for them. Another compliments their weaving. You're fairly certain neither has shown such enthusiasm for wool since their own weddings. The girls know it. And you know they know it. One day, Beatrice sidles up to you with a sly smile. "You think I could get a pig out of this?" You raise an eyebrow. "Only if he's house-trained." She giggles, and you realize, despite the pressure, the gossip, the looming threat of being wed to someone who collects beetles for fun, she's a little excited. Not because of romance, but because she has a card to play. Historians still argue whether women in the 14th century viewed inheritance as empowerment or as another trap disguised in parchment. Probably both. You feel it too. The coin always flips. The dowry becomes the next hot topic. Every mother in the village starts taking quiet inventory of what might go in her daughter's marriage chest. Not just coins and livestock, but clothing, tools, blankets, and, of course, the occasional bottle of hoarded honey wine. You remember your own dowry. Modest, but enough. A comb, a length of wool, a small copper pot, and a string of beads. You weren't proud of it. You weren't ashamed either. It was just your entry fee into the game. But Marjorie and Beatrice? Their game has bigger stakes. You advise their mother to split the land equally, but add that the elder daughter might need a stronger dowry to draw a better match. She sighs. How did we end up here? You offer her tea. Probably a combination of fate, poor record keeping, and the plague missing us last year. She snorts. Not funny? No, you agree, but still technically accurate. As the girls' futures hang in delicate balance, an old man named Osbert starts visiting again. He's harmless, mostly, widowed, talks like a rooster in winter, but he has land and no heirs. You catch him eyeing Marjorie. She rolls her eyes behind his back and then smiles sweetly, like she's imagining sewing his shroud in secret. She's not for sale, her mother growls to you. Technically, you say, she kind of is. She swats your arm, hard. You go home that night and stare at your own child. He's 2 now, clumsy, loud, obsessed with chickens. And you wonder, will he ever have to choose between love and land? Or will he simply follow the path carved for him like rain along a rut? You hope it's neither. But in this world, hope is like a patch on an old tunic, visible, fragile, and occasionally the only thing holding things together. Marjorie's fate is sealed soon enough. She's betrothed to a man from the next village, slightly younger than Osbert, slightly richer than your husband. She doesn't cry. She does ask if she can take the cat with her. Beatrice? She waits, and begins, quietly, to study herbs. You're not sure if she's stalling or planning a second career. Maybe both. You help her dry mint leaves, and she teaches your boy the difference between stinging nettle and parsley. It's the beginning of something. Maybe not freedom, but something. Dowries, inheritances, and ambitions swirl in your village like wood smoke. And you, now a veteran of this never-ending barter, are more than just an observer. You are a record keeper, a quiet mentor, a woman who has survived the market and is learning to read its signs. There's something strange in the air. It's not just the scent of early summer, though the meadows are bursting and the sheep look smugly overfed. No, it's something less obvious. A tension, like the fields themselves are waiting. The noble court is coming, and not just passing through on the way to somewhere more important. No, they're actually visiting, a temporary residence, a bit of spectacle, and, of course, an opportunity to match their sons and daughters to your local crop of marriageable youth, like prize cabbages. You've seen this before. Once, when you were a girl, they came in silk and banners, smelling of rose water and horse sweat. This time, they'll probably smell the same, but their eyes will be sharper. Because while the court pretends to come for leisure, everyone knows why they're really here. Marriage season is about to hit peak pageant. Mainstream fact coming in. Throughout the 1300s, royal and noble courts often toured their domains, not only for governance, but also to observe, assess, and arrange potential marriage alliances with local gentry and upwardly mobile families. You clean your front stoop more often. the miller's wife suddenly finds money for new ribbons. Marjorie's younger cousin, now 16 and skittish as a cat, is drilled daily in court manners and embroidery like her life depends on it. Which, let's be honest, it kind of does. The buzz is everywhere. Someone spots the heralds 2 villages over. A knight is seen sharpening his sword, just in case. You hear that Lady Aline of Northport, a wealthy dowager with an unmarried son, is bringing her whole household, including a lute player and a jester. Beatrice leans in, deadpan. If I end up married to a man who travels with a jester, I'm cursing everyone. You nod. That's fair. Fringe tidbit time. Some noble families carried marriage portfolios, literal scrolls with notes on eligible children across the region, including bloodlines, dowries, temperament, and even complexion. Sort of like Tinder, but with better parchment. You suspect you've made someone's list. Not for yourself, of course. You're off the market, thankfully. But your niece, Elswith, has just turned 14, and she sings like a nightingale when she isn't arguing with chickens. You pull her aside one morning as she's attempting to detangle her hair with a fork. Listen, you begin gently. There's going to be attention soon, from people with opinions. Don't panic. She freezes. I already am panicking. You sigh. Good. That means your instincts work. The preparations for the court's arrival are equal parts wedding fair and theatrical disaster. Floors are scrubbed. A feast is planned. The local blacksmith mysteriously disappears, then returns with a beard and a new shirt. Rumors fly. There's a baron with a limp, a viscount with gout, a lady with a suspicious interest in astrology. And in the middle of it all, you remain the eye of the storm. You're asked to help supervise the flower arrangements for the welcoming ceremony. Code for, please keep the younger girls from running off into the woods. You agree, reluctantly. Elswith, ever rebellious, suggests a wreath of garlic to ward off unwanted suitors. You laugh, then secretly pack a few cloves, just in case. The day finally arrives. The procession is dazzling. Silks, feathers, armor polished to mirror brightness. Horses prance, trumpets squeak, children gasp. And behind it all, the real purpose trails like perfume. Alliances, alliances, alliances. The court settles in. Tents are erected. The manor bursts with life. And the matchmaking begins before the bread is even sliced. Lady Aline holds court from a velvet chair, like she was born on a throne. Her gaze scans the local girls with the precision of a hawk eyeing rabbits. You are not immune to the judgment. She'll be matched before the week is out, the lady murmurs at one point, nodding toward Elswith. You lean over. She's also deathly afraid of geese. Aline blinks. Just saying, important character detail. Historians still argue whether these court visits offered actual opportunities for upward social mobility, or merely reinforced existing hierarchies by handpicking only those families deemed suitably deferential and well-connected. Probably depends on who you ask, and how good their plum cake was. Over the next few days, it becomes clear 2 local girls are being seriously considered. Elswith is one of them. The other is a girl named Joan. Tall, shy, and blessed with astonishingly perfect teeth. No one knows how. We suspect divine intervention. You catch Elswith staring out the window late one night. "What if I don't want it?" she asks, voice trembling. You don't answer right away. "Then don't pretend to," you finally say. "You can be sweet, sure, but don't lie with your eyes. If they ask, and you're not sure, say so." She swallows hard. "Won't that ruin everything?" "Only if you let them tell you what everything means." She hugs you before bed. And that's enough, for now. The feasts are endless. There's music, dancing, awkward attempts at courtship. You overhear a knight comparing one girl's eyes to fresh trout which is not as flattering as he seems to think. One afternoon, Lady Aline calls on your house. She drinks your cider. She examines your tapestries. She stares a bit too long at your shoes. Then, softly, she says, "Your niece could thrive in court. Her bearing is natural. Her wit is untamed." You nod. "She's also terrible at sewing." Lady Aline smiles thinly. "That can be fixed. You're not sure if that's a threat or a promise. In the end, it's Joan who is chosen. Perfect teeth triumph. Lady Aline claims she saw a vision in a dream. More likely, she saw a more convenient family connection. But who are we to judge dreams? Elswith is relieved, genuinely. You see it in the way her shoulders relax, in the return of her off-key singing while hauling buckets. "I didn't want to be plucked like a chicken," she says, half laughing. "Fair," you reply. "Though you'd look very dignified with feathers." She throws a turnip at you. You dodge. And so the court moves on. But the afterglow lingers. Some girls dream harder now, others tighten their scarves. And all around you, the machine keeps humming. Marriage, property, lineage, and lavender sachets stuffed into hope chests. You watch it all, and somehow it doesn't make you tired. It makes you alert, because stories like these are always starting again, just under the surface. Sometimes it's not the weddings that wear you out, it's the negotiations. See, long after the feast crumbs are swept and the music has faded, two families still need to agree on terms. And when you're in the thick of a serious marriage contract, suddenly everyone's got strong feelings about how many geese count as a gesture of goodwill. Right now, you're stuck between two fathers who have been arguing about the size of a fish pond for over an hour. "You said 4 rods, one bellows, smacking his cup on the table. "I said near 4 rods. The other huffs, beard twitching like an angry squirrel. You sip your drink and pretend to go deaf. It doesn't work. Mainstream fact for you. In the 1300s, marriage contracts were often detailed, semi-legal documents negotiated by the two families, sometimes involving land, livestock, income expectations, and dispute resolution clauses. Love, as usual, was not invited to the table. These weren't scribbled "I owe you" notes. These were full-on agreements, complete with witnesses, seals, and a lot of side-eye. Some were verbal, others were written, but they always had a shelf life, especially if the deal fell through, or worse, if one party died before the wedding, which happened often enough that it was built into the small print. Today, the argument is about Beatrice. Yes, that Beatrice, still unmarried, still mixing herbs, still dragging her heels like someone walking into a snake pit. A suitor has emerged. Thomas, a widower from 2 villages over, reasonably handsome, 2 children, owns a working mill. He even has a dog that doesn't bite. Sounds promising, right? But the contract is where things get sticky. Beatrice's mother wants a clause guaranteeing Beatrice's right to use a portion of her inherited land. Thomas, politely but firmly, says no. That land should become part of his holdings upon marriage. After all, she won't need it, not with him in charge. You watch Beatrice's jaw tighten like a trap. Fringe tidbit. In some 14th century villages, there were local customs that allowed widows, or even unmarried women, to keep small plots of land in life tenure if they could prove they'd maintained it with their own hands. Beatrice probably knows this. You taught her. Historians still argue whether women like Beatrice were negotiating out of resistance, strategy, or sheer exhaustion. But you've seen the way she clutches that herb pouch on her belt like it's armor. That night, Beatrice asks you to walk with her. "Do you think I'm being selfish?" she asks, voice low. "No," you answer without hesitation. "You're being strategic. Big difference." She nods, then laughs. "His dog does seem nice." You pause. "Dogs are great, until you're married to one." She snorts. "You're terrible." Thank you. The next day, the contract is revised. Beatrice will keep control of her 2 acres, but must promise to cultivate at least 1 for sustenance. Everyone pretends not to notice that the definition of sustenance is vague enough to drive a cart through. The deal is sealed with cider and cheese. Beatrice does not look thrilled, but she doesn't look crushed either. You'll take that as a win. Elsewhere in the village, the contract madness spreads like a cold in spring. Young Elswith, still reeling from not being chosen by the noble court, is now the subject of a local suitor's interest. Someone you hadn't seen coming. Tomlin, the shepherd's son. Soft-spoken, bad knees, fantastic handwriting. He's already drafted a contract himself. You read it aloud. I, Tomlin, do pledge to maintain the flock of my family, provide no fewer than 2 loaves of bread per week, and not interrupt Elswith when she's humming. You blink. That last part's genius. Elswith blushes. He listens. The families meet. They negotiate. And for once, there's little drama. Tomlin's mother offers a fleece as part of his dowry. Elswith's family throws in a spinning wheel. And just like that, a match is made not by banners or land, but by mutual respect and a shared fondness for bees. You let yourself feel something. Warmth, maybe. Not all matches in the 1300s were tragic. Some were, dare we say it, sane. Still, not everyone's dancing. The old bachelor, Osbert, you remember him, has now turned his sights on a 14-year-old orphan named Lena. Her parents died 2 winters ago. She lives with her aunt and works mornings at the bakehouse. He's offering 3 goats and a small cottage. Everyone acts like this is generous. You are not impressed. Lena looks pale whenever his name is mentioned. Her aunt claims it's a wise match. You pull her aside. She's terrified. She needs security. She needs a future. You know you're overstepping, but you've seen too many of these marriages end with one partner silent and the other oblivious. So you bring Lena into your kitchen, teach her how to make honey oat cakes, slip her a list of herbs that help calm nerves. Then, more quietly, give her a name. An older midwife in the next village who helps girls who want out. Fringe work, maybe, but important. Lena never marries Osbert. He moves on, mumbling about ungrateful girls. You toast quietly with Beatrice. The season begins to slow. Contracts finalized, dowries handed off, hope chests filled. And while the village exhales, you notice a new pattern. More young women coming to you, not for matchmaking advice, but for negotiation skills. How do I ask for a clause that lets me visit my sister? What if I want to keep a bit of my wool profits? What happens if his uncle moves in? You answer them all, because you know the secret. The market isn't just about matches, it's about leverage. The contract, after all, is just a piece of parchment. But knowing your worth? That's real power. The kind that lasts, even after the goat dies. Autumn tiptoes in, barefoot, quiet, and a little damp. The village smells of damp wool, wood smoke, and apples just starting to soften. Everything is slower now. The leaves begin their theatrical fall, drifting like forgotten promises from the canopy. Even the chickens seem less opinionated. And still the marriage market hums beneath it all. Quieter now, but still alive. You can feel it in the glances at market stalls, the sudden awkward pauses in conversations, the way someone's mother casually asks if you've seen that stonemason's boy lately. You have. He's growing a mustache. Poorly. Today, though, the talk isn't about mustaches. It's about a wedding. Finally. Beatrice is getting married. After months of postponements, contract revisions, and one spectacular row about where the couple would store turnips, the day has come. You're not sure if she's more excited or exhausted, but she's wearing her best shoes, so that counts for something. Mainstream fact incoming. Weddings in the 1300s could be surprisingly low-key, especially outside the nobility. While there were church blessings and community feasts, the ceremony itself might be little more than a spoken vow exchanged before witnesses, often at the church door. That's where Beatrice is now, standing just outside the chapel, fingers twitching at her sides, eyes sharp as blackthorn. Thomas, her soon-to-be husband, stands beside her in a tunic that might once have been blue. His beard is neat. His dog, the non-biting one, waits patiently a few paces away, tail thudding on the grass. The priest begins the words, slow and steady. Beatrice repeats them without flinching. She adds her own twist at the end, and I promise not to poison your soup unless you deserve it. Laughter ripples through the crowd. Thomas bows dramatically. Fair terms. Fringe tidbit. In some rural communities, playful jests or coded remarks were woven into marriage vows as a kind of social insurance, acknowledging both the seriousness and absurdity of marriage. One recorded vow ends with, "And if he doth snore, I shall bury him under straw." After the vows, the priest blesses them. The church bells creak reluctantly into motion. A few children throw dried petals. One of them misses and hits Thomas in the eye. He doesn't flinch. Beatrice seems impressed, and just like that, it's done. No fanfare, no parade, just two people walking hand in hand toward a future full of firewood arguments, shared cider, and hopefully no snoring. The feast happens later, back at the village hall. You help with the preparations, stewing beans, slicing cheese, swatting flies like a vengeful ghost. Ellsworth is on music duty. She plucks a lute with the confidence of someone who only knows 3 chords, and insists those are plenty. The food is humble, but hearty. Everyone brings something. Even Osbert shows up, still unmarried, still sulking, still unmarried, still sulking, still holding out hope that someone will appreciate his boiled onions. They won't. Beatrice thanks you later, just before the dancing starts. "I'm still scared," she admits, "but less than I was." You smile. Then you're exactly where you should be. Dancing begins, the kind that looks more like clumsy jumping than graceful movement. Someone breaks a plate, someone else tries to juggle apples. You spot 2 people sneak off toward the barn with matching guilty grins. "New match?" you ask Beatrice. "Or a future argument about geese?" You both laugh. And somewhere between the cider and the last sliver of honey cake, you feel something you rarely allow yourself. Hope. Historians still argue whether women in rural 14th century communities had meaningful agency in their marriages, or whether the few exceptions have been overly romanticized by modern scholars. The truth probably lives somewhere in the uncomfortable, muddy middle. But tonight, you see it. Carved into smiles, stitched into shawls, baked into pies. Agency doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just stays on its feet when everything else is tipping. The night stretches long, moon-drenched and whispery. Eventually, the fire dies down. The children fall asleep in corners. The musicians slow. The dog curls up under a table, dreaming twitchily of meat pies. Beatrice and Thomas leave quietly, no one making a fuss. It feels right. Not every story needs fireworks. You stay behind to clean, stacking plates, humming under your breath. Ellsworth joins you. "She did it," she says, in her own way. "So will you," you reply. "Can I skip the turnips part?" No promises. The next morning, dew clings to everything like a secret. You walk through the quiet village with heavy feet and a light heart. You pass the chapel, where someone's hung a wreath of lavender. You pass Beatrice's new home, where smoke curls from the chimney. And you pass the bakehouse, where Lane waves at you with flower-covered hands, and no wedding ring in sight. Everyone's choosing, not always loudly, not always freely, but choosing nonetheless. And now the market is shifting again. New matches are on the horizon, new alliances, new contracts. But for now, the village sighs and settles, like a basket finally put down. It's a good place to pause, not the end, just a deep, satisfying breath. Winter slides in, wrapping the village in frost and hush. The air bites your cheeks with a cold sharper than last year's iron tools, and the hearth fire becomes more than just comfort. It's survival. Despite the cold, the marriage market doesn't freeze. Instead, it shifts gears. Fewer public gatherings, more private talks by the firelight. Families huddle together, planning for spring, deciding which young ones might be married off as soon as the thaw hits. You watch as the village settles into its winter rhythm, but beneath the snow, whispers stir. One such whisper concerns the infamous marriage by proxy, a practice where the bride or groom isn't physically present during the ceremony. It sounds strange to your modern ears, but back then, it was a necessary and sometimes even strategic solution. Mainstream fact. Marriage by proxy was a legal and common practice in medieval Europe, particularly among the nobility and merchant classes, allowing alliances to be formed even when travel or politics made physical meetings impossible. In your village, word has spread that Lady Allen's son, Lord Edwin, who is currently embroiled in a dispute far away over land rights, intends to marry a local girl, Maud, without ever meeting her face to face before the ceremony. This arrangement sparks a mix of curiosity and anxiety among villagers. Some wonder how Maud feels about marrying a man she's never met. Others question whether this is really marriage or just another kind of contract. Fringe tidbit. In some rare cases, proxy marriages were performed with a family member or trusted representative standing in for the absent spouse, sometimes even a wooden effigy dressed in finery. Talk about ghost weddings. Maud, meanwhile, seems oddly calm. You find her in the market, carefully wrapping herbs and humming a tune that sounds like a lullaby. When you ask how she feels, she shrugs and says, "He could be a bear or a prince. At least I'm marrying someone who has a roof." Historians still argue whether proxy marriages were empowering tools allowing women to secure status and protection, or simply ways for men to consolidate power without personal commitment. The answer probably depends on who you ask, and whether the proxy showed up on time. Meanwhile, your own niece Els, has been invited to a small gathering at the manor. The noble lord is back from court and apparently quite taken with her charm and quick wit. She confides in you. "I'm not sure if he likes me or my spinning wheel." You chuckle. If he doesn't like your spinning wheel, he's not worth your yarn. As winter deepens, you reflect on how marriages in this time weren't just about love or affection. They were survival, strategy, and sometimes a bit of luck. The cold months may keep people indoors, but they don't stop the market from turning. Snowflakes fall outside your window as you prepare for another season of change. The frost thaws, and with it comes the restless stirrings of spring. The village wakes slowly, like a bear blinking at dawn, stretching its paws. Birds chatter in the budding trees, and the scent of damp earth fills the air, a mixture of hope, mud, and well-meaning sweat. With the change of season, the marriage market picks up pace again, almost as if the earth itself insists on matches being made before the next planting. This is when you see the full theatricality of the matchmaking dance. The coded glances, whispered rumors, and carefully choreographed visits to neighbors. You trudge through the morning market, the clatter of carts and chatter mixing with the sweet scent of freshly baked bread. The young men and women, each wrapped in their best woolens, eye one another like hawks sizing up prey. Only the prey hopes to be caught. Among them is Mabel, a quiet girl with a fierce gaze and an uncanny knack for healing herbs. She's caught the eye of a burly blacksmith's apprentice named Jory, whose hands are as big as the anvils he works. The blacksmith's family has tossed their weight behind the match, seeing the advantage in pairing a healer with a strong arm. It's practical, sure, but there's a tenderness in the way Jory watches Mabel as she moves among the stalls, arranging her wares with quiet precision. Mainstream fact: marriages in rural communities during the 1300s often served economic and social functions, binding families together through shared labor and resources rather than romantic love. You watch them from afar, noticing how Mabel always seems to pause near the spinning wheel, a silent signal to her friends that she's thinking about the future. Fringe tidbit: some village communities had unofficial matchmakers or gossip networks, often older women who knew every secret and could subtly nudge relationships along, sometimes with hilarious results. Historians still argue whether such informal networks were empowering tools for women or just another layer of social pressure. Meanwhile, Jory's mother approaches you with a knowing smile. "She's good for him," she says, nodding toward Mabel. "Is he good for her?" She shrugs. "Strong hands and a steady heart. Sometimes that's enough." Elsewhere, the lord of the manor announces a courtship festival, a gathering where eligible youth from the village and surrounding areas come to mingle under the guise of dance and song. It's the closest thing to a dating app they have. The festival buzzes with nervous energy. You help oversee the preparations, arranging torches and making sure the ale is flowing, responsibly. The night arrives with twinkling stars and the scent of wood smoke. Lanterns sway gently, casting playful shadows on the faces of hopefuls. Mabel and Jory dance, stumbling through the steps but laughing all the while. Elswith waltzes with a burly merchant's son, while Beatrice, now settled into married life, watches fondly from the sidelines. The music swells, and for a moment, the weight of contracts, dowries, and expectations slips away. You catch yourself smiling. Maybe, just maybe, the market has room for a little magic after all. Spring edges toward summer, and with it comes the buzz of change and, yes, gossip. The village is alive with chatter, some of it sweet, some sharp enough to sting. You lean against the worn stone wall of the market square, watching as news flows faster than the river after a thaw. One piece of news spreads like wildfire. Lady Aline's son, Lord Edwin, the same man who married Maud by proxy, is finally arriving in person. The village is abuzz with speculation. Will Maud's marriage stand or crumble under the weight of this long-distance arrangement? The church bells ring out, announcing the Lord's arrival. You watch the procession, a mix of soldiers, servants, and a nervous Maud clutching her cloak tight. Mainstream fact: noble visits to rural villages, especially involving marriage alliances, were important political and social events, often used to assert authority and forge alliances. When Lord Edwin steps from his horse, the first thing he does is look for Maud, who meets his gaze with an unexpected steadiness. You notice a subtle nod exchanged between them. No grand declarations, just an understanding forged in silence. Fringe tidbit: in some documented cases, noble spouses married by proxy developed genuine relationships after meeting, while in others, the union remained purely transactional, maintained through letters and emissaries. Historians still argue whether the emotional bonds in such marriages were genuine or simply adaptations to political necessity. Elsewhere in the village, whispers swirl about Elswith and the merchant's son, who seems to be gaining favor with the lord's household. Some villagers grumble about ambition, others admire her quick wit and steady resolve. You remind yourself that ambition isn't a bad thing, especially for a woman in the 1300s. One afternoon, you find Maud in the herb garden, tending plants with a focus that suggests she's reclaiming some control over her life. She seems strong, you tell Ellsworth. She has to be, Ellsworth replies. Marriages like hers aren't easy. You nod. The market has changed. Less about mere contracts, more about navigating power, survival, and sometimes even affection. Later, you overhear a heated debate at the tavern. Whether marriage truly bonds souls or simply serves as a strategic tool for families to climb social ladders. You sip your ale and smile. After all, some things don't change. The long days of early summer bring a different kind of energy to the village, one that hums with both promise and tension. The fields are lush, but beneath the green, the unseen gears of social maneuvering continue to turn, grinding quietly but relentlessly. You find yourself at the crossroads of these changes, watching as marriages evolve from mere transactions into delicate dances of negotiation, desire, and power. Take Ellsworth, for instance. She's no longer just the witty girl with flour on her hands. She's a figure of growing influence. Rumors swirl that she's being considered as a bride for a rising merchant from the nearby town, someone who could offer connections beyond the village, perhaps even a pathway out. You catch Ellsworth one evening near the river, her face lit by the amber glow of sunset. "I want more than this village," she says quietly. "More than the spinning wheel and the endless market talk." It's a sentiment you recognize, yearning for something beyond what the earth and seasons offer. Mainstream fact. By the 14th century, merchant families were increasingly involved in marriage alliances to secure economic and social advancement, blurring lines between rural tradition and emerging urban influence. At the same time, the village elders grumble about these city connections, worried that their traditions might be washed away like spring floods. Fringe tidbit. Some medieval villages experimented with marriage fairs, where families from different regions came together not just for matchmaking, but to exchange news, goods, and political alliances. A medieval version of speed dating, with a dash of diplomacy. Historians still argue whether these events helped empower individuals or merely reinforced existing power structures. Meanwhile, Beatrice and Thomas are settling into a new rhythm. You see them working side by side in their small cottage, sharing laughter and the occasional minor argument about turnip storage. Their marriage isn't perfect, but it's theirs, crafted out of compromise and shared moments. You think about the generations before, the countless unnamed women and men who lived through these cycles of market and marriage, hope and hardship. In this shifting world, love and strategy aren't always easy to untangle. But maybe, just maybe, they don't have to be. You watch the village breathe under the fading light, ready for whatever tomorrow brings. Summer deepens, and with it, the village settles into a warm, lazy rhythm, the kind that makes you want to sit under a tree and watch clouds drift like lazy ships on a slow sea. But beneath that calm surface, life continues its relentless march, especially when it comes to marriage and all its tangled webs. You notice the subtle shifts, the way families adjust alliances, how promises whispered in winter are tested by the heat of summer. The market isn't just a place, it's a living thing, a reflection of hopes, fears, and dreams. And in the 1300s, for young women especially, it was a crossroads of opportunity and constraint. You remember the stories you've witnessed, Beatrice's quiet courage, Maud's unexpected strength, Ellsworth's ambition, and Mabel's tender blossoming. Each path unique, shaped by circumstance, choice, and sometimes sheer stubbornness. Mainstream fact. In medieval Europe, Marriage was often the primary means by which families secured economic stability and social status, making the personal deeply political. Fringe tidbit. Some villages developed informal marriage pacts between families, agreements that sometimes lasted generations and shaped entire communities' fates. Historians still argue whether these long-term alliances helped communities survive or stifled individual freedoms. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting the world in gold and shadow, you feel the weight and wonder of all these lives intertwined. Marriage was no fairy tale, no simple love story. It was a complex dance, sometimes clumsy, sometimes graceful, always deeply human. And as you close your eyes tonight, imagine the faces behind the names. The hands joined in hope or duty, the quiet breaths shared in cold cottages. Remember, every match was a story, a beginning, an ending, and everything in between.